Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another Sponge review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Jack Richard's Beyond Training. A little bit of background, I picked up this book about probably 3 years ago, and I read it then. I remember putting lots of highlights and notes throughout. And then I picked it up maybe another month or so ago with the intention of rereading it. And because I wanted to see if I could get anything new out of it. And it was really interesting to see the changes over the time. So what I valued from the book a number of years ago was quite different to what I valued now. Obviously, I've had the benefit of a number of years really focusing on teacher education. And so the knowledge and experiences that I bring to reading sort of changed my perspective of the book this time. So that was quite interesting. But anyway, right, let's get into it. So we're going to look at the review, we're going to look at what I liked, what I didn't like. You know the deal. Here we go. Okay, a very, very brief summary about Beyond Training. In essence, it focuses on different aspects of training and the levels of training. All kind of with the focus of developing critically reflective teachers. And it goes a little bit, I'm not going to say deep, because it doesn't go deep in certain areas, but it looks at the thinking behind certain things within teacher education. So it's not your usual teacher training and development or second language teacher education book, but it is certainly a very interesting one and eye-opening for the perspectives that it looks at. Okay, so what are my takeaways from the book? Well, there are a few, as always with these books, there are loads, but I'm just going to focus on three. The first one is actually focused on what he calls 6 domains of content. And I'm going to read them out for us. So there are 6 domains of content in second language teaching education, and these are theories of teaching, teaching skills, communication skills, subject matter knowledge, pedagogical reasoning and decision making, that's one together, and contextual knowledge. And all of these areas, if you will, or domains, are important within teacher education because they relate to what happens in the classroom. And it was quite interesting to look at how by breaking these up into certain areas, we could focus on ways in which we could develop teachers in these areas, or perhaps some of the things that will help teachers develop in these areas. And also some of the implications for training. So for example, he was talking about subject matter knowledge, and there was a point throughout or later on in the book that looked at how subject matter knowledge, not only of teaching and language, but also, for example, with literature, can affect how teachers actually teach and perhaps even the effectiveness of their lessons. So that was quite interesting as well. Right, another takeaway from the book is that we should focus on teachers' maxims and personal teaching theories if we're looking to help develop them and perhaps even help change some of their thought processes around certain things that happen in the classroom and their own thoughts around how they see themselves as a teacher. So one thing that is stressed throughout the entirety of the book is the idea that teachers work from their own sets of beliefs, values, attitudes, expectations, experiences, so on and so forth. And so they bring all of this knowledge there. And no matter how much we sort of give them this received knowledge of, okay, this is what it needs to be, they're still going to always work from those personal teaching theories. So what we as teacher educators need to do then is we need to draw out these personal teaching theories. We need to draw out and make explicit these values, attitudes, beliefs, expectations. Because from there, we can identify needs. We can also identify or create situations in which these beliefs can be pushed or prodded and sort of analyzed, if you will. But also this has the added benefit of making them aware of their values, attitudes, beliefs, and perhaps how they are not consistent with their teaching practices. So we have kind of this cognitive dissonance, if you will. Now, Richards, along with this, speaks that a lot of the time that this difference is actually put down to environmental factors, such as number of learners, the type of methodology that's pushed in the school, and so on and so forth. Which I thought was interesting, because I also think that teachers take on these beliefs kind of in an espoused manner. They hear them, they say, okay, that's what I do, but then in actual reality, they don't do that. So I think there are a few things to consider there. Okay, my last major takeaway kind of tags on to what I was speaking about before, and this is the idea that not only is experience, but subject matter knowledge, personal training, everything influences how teachers are going to teach. Now, as trainers, then we should be looking to create opportunities that develops all of these areas. And Richards, it doesn't go into too much detail about it, but he does provide some examples which I thought were quite interesting. And the one about working with literature was perhaps the most eye-opening. Just to recap that, basically it was a study that there were 3 groups. One group had extensive training or a degree that focused on working with literature, as well as experience in teaching. And the other 2 groups had no experience. If I remember correctly, there was had training in literature but very little experience. And then they had another group that had lots of experience but no experience with working with literature. And they found that the group of teachers that obviously with more experience as well as training had vastly different lessons to those with plenty of experience but no training in their subject matter knowledge. And so I think that has a huge implication for us, because as language teachers we're often expected to work with material from textbooks, and we may even be encouraged to try using literature. And so I think as teacher educators, if we're expecting teachers to do this, then we need to provide some of that subject matter training for working in those contexts. Okay, so what did I like about this book? Well, first of all, it's a quick read. It's about 200 pages, and for me, I like how Richards writes. I find him quite easy to read. And so if you're looking for something that's not too crazy, like Lewis, for example, who in my mind writes as if it's a manifesto, then I think this book is going to be quite good for you. The book also has some brilliant ideas. There are not many ideas, I have to say that, but the ideas that are presented are really quite cool. So there's one that I'm also going to talk about in one of the other sections, and it's the idea of a 3-way observation. So where we have the student is involved, the teacher is involved, and the students, and the observer are all involved, and they all have a task to complete within the observation. And this for me is a really, really brilliant idea, and I'm going to talk about that in a sec. Another thing that I like is that it pushes the reader. It's really emphasizing us to work from those values, attitudes, beliefs, expectations, experiences, so on and so forth, and drawing them out and bringing them into the training room. And this ties into what I've read and from my own experience as a trainer for working with these sorts of things. And a lot of the points actually tie into another book that I reference quite often, which is Write and Believe Those, Trainer Development. So yeah, those are the things that I really liked. Okay, so what didn't I like? I mean, the book itself is kind of strange because it's not focused on one specific area of teacher education. There are loads of little things that they look at. And so in a sense, you get this kind of superficial feeling. It doesn't go too deep into anything. It gives you like the taster, if you will. And which is fine, but if you're looking for more, then you come away reading that chapter and you think, well, I would have liked to know more about that. But no, you can't. So that's one thing to take into consideration. Another point is that there are not a lot of studies, but there are a number of studies that are presented in the book. And rather than just looking at the conclusions or the implications from the studies, they go through the methodology and things like that. Now, for a book that's only 200 pages, I thought that a lot of the way that the studies were carried out could have been reduced. I'm not saying removed, I'm saying reduced. Now, this does not mean that I'm advocating that we as teacher educators or teachers jump over these parts when we're reading research, because these are really, really important for us to be able to critically evaluate the research. But I think for the book, they could have been reduced. Just a small point, eh? And lastly, I thought that a book that was trying to emphasize the idea of developing critically reflective teachers, that there weren't any sort of reflection tasks at the end of the chapters, which I thought was a bit rich. So I would have liked to have had more tasks that asked me to reflect on the content that was in the book. So how am I going to apply some of the stuff that I've learned from this book, or some of the new information that I've gained? Well, there are two things that I'd like to focus on. The first of all is something that I do now, but I'm going to take it even further. And that's this idea of identifying teachers' maxims. So Richards in the book, he speaks about the idea of, well, he actually gives an example of teachers teaching, and then the trainer or the observers, they were identifying what their beliefs were. So for example, if they carried out an introduction where they reviewed language, that their maxim, a teacher maxim might be, it's important to revise language from previous lessons. And so I really like this idea, but bringing it into a training context, not only with just the observer, but also the teacher as well. So having a transcript or the video from a lesson observation, and maybe getting, it could even involve a critical incident, but getting a teacher to watch 20-25 minutes of it, and the observer doing the same, and each of them trying to identify the teacher's beliefs behind their decisions. I think that would be quite eye-opening. Another thing that I like to apply to my practice is the idea of three-way observation, as mentioned before. I'd like to really, really try this in term 1 of the next academic year, because I think it's a great way to get all perspectives on what could be different, and trying to incorporate that into the individual teacher's development. I think it'd be, I mean, I've never done it to that degree, so I'm interested to see how it goes. So who should read this book? Well, if you're a teacher educator, you should read this book. If you're looking to move into teacher training, don't read it yet. I'd say hold off on reading it right now. If you're going to be involved in teacher education for a while, you should definitely read this book, because it looks at some really, really intricate things, or areas with certain nuances, which I found really, really interesting. But I don't think it's for an early career trainer, for example. There's another recommendation that I have, and that's for materials writers, but it's not for the whole book. There's a chapter that focuses on course books being a hindrance or a help in teacher development, and it is very interesting. I'm not going to spoil it for you all, and I hope you do check it out, but it is a very interesting chapter, and if you're a materials writer or involved in creating course books, I highly recommend it. Okay, so beyond training, it was a great read, quick read, focus on various aspects of teacher training. It's not your usual teacher training and development book, and it's certainly not for those early career trainers before they move into training. But it is definitely for us teacher educators that are looking to make a career out of working in teacher education, who have been in for a while, and we're looking to take our understanding of some of the intricate or some of the specific parts a little bit deeper. Superficial in some parts, but I suppose it gives us a taster of where we could, or perhaps even should, do more research ourselves. So overall, great read, highly recommended. Just bear those things in mind before picking this up. All right, everybody. If you like this review, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.